David Crystal, who you've all turned out, good decision people, turned out to see this afternoon. He works from his home in Holyhead in North Wales as a writer, editor, lecturer and broadcaster. He's published quite literally more than 100 books on an extremely diverse range of subjects, as you know, mostly related to the field of language. He explores linguistics in relation to education and clinical settings, and he's generally championed language since the first publication, I think, was in 1964, but he's championed language as an evolving and dynamic and living resource, which is perhaps one of the reasons that people respond so brilliantly to his work. His work in broadcasting is just as extensive and wide-ranging, and he's published a great deal in Shakespeare too, so you might hear a bit more about that this afternoon as well. He's Professor of Linguistics at the University of Bangor. He holds multiple honorary degrees, chairs and presidencies. I do encourage you, if he doesn't relate at all today, to have a look on his website just to see the sheer diversity of the things he's been working on over the years, volumes of devotional poetry and all kinds of things. Astonishing, really. He also received, in 1995, I think, an OBE for services to the English language. He's perhaps best known for his two encyclopedias for Cambridge University Press, the Encyclopedia of Language and the Encyclopedia of the English Language. His recent books include You Say Potato, a book about accents, with his actor son Ben Crystal, and The Disappearing Dictionary, a treasury of lost English dialect words. And it's these two books today that he's primarily going to share with you. He's going to talk for 40 or 45 minutes on these two books, and then we'll leave a good 20 minutes at the end I'll ask a question or two, and then we'll open straight up to the floor for you guys, because I'm sure you've got lots of burning issues you'd like to raise with him about the future of the English language. So without further ado, please give a very warm welcome to the fabulous Professor David Crystal.
Hi. I've been shopping for the Disappearing Dictionary, you see, which is this. I'll tell you about this in a minute. It's a heavy book, though. Books are good. Do you know this firm up in Grasmere? Everything is good. And they have, grandmothers are good. Poets are good. Books are good. That's where we found that. Talking to you about two books today. Yes, absolutely. Two of the recent books that have come out. One by myself and one with my son Ben. Two sides of a coin, really. The Disappearing Dictionary is all about dialects. You Say Potato is all about accents. The difference between the two? Well, dialects are vocabulary and grammar. They're dialect words we talk about, don't we? And dialect grammar in sentences. Accent is all about pronunciation. So a different way in which you say things in speech. The two go together, absolutely complementing each other, because both are there to express this fundamental desire we all have to express our identity in language. There are two forces that always drive language, aren't there? There's the force for intelligibility. We've got to understand each other. And that produces a standard language and a standard accent so that we all understand each other. But the other force is the force for identity. We need to say who we are and where we're from and with what group do we belong to and all of that sort of thing. And accents and dialects are the primary things that allow us to express our identity to other people. And they're difficult books to write about. I mean, as the lady said, I've written a lot of books. It's not so hard when you're writing about the standard language, because there we've got a standard spelling system and a standard punctuation system and all the rest of it. But when you're talking about dialects and accents in particular, oh gosh, I mean, how do you write them down? That's one of the problems. How on earth do you write an accent down? How on earth do you capture the extraordinary variety that exists in dialects when there are so many? I mean, that's one of the wonderful things about dialect, isn't it? As you will know, wherever you are from in this room, there's a dialect difference there. there's an accent difference there. Probably no two people in this room have exactly the same accent, even though a number of us will share certain features. The reason, of course, is that we've all moved around. I mean, what's coming out of this mouth now, for instance? Where am I from, as it were, in terms of my dialect? Well, I'm using pretty standard English at the moment, aren't I? But in terms of my accent, where am I from? What you're hearing is a real mongrel mix of bits and pieces that have come through my life over the last 40 years or so. And I started out in Wales. You're not hearing much of that. Well, I could, of course, start speaking a little more like the accent of the place I'm from. I'm actually living in Holyhead at the moment, which is, it's sort of, it's near Ireland. It's over that way. There are hints of my Welsh background in my modern accent, but not very many, but I can slip into it very naturally if I want to. And then at age 10, I went to Liverpool because my family moved there. And that's probably what you're hearing more of than anything else, something Lancashire-y or Merseyside-y, but it's not a Liverpool accent, is it? I mean, it's not that. It's not really that, but it's hinting in that direction. Why did I switch? Because I was beaten up, basically. Yeah? I mean, imagine it, 10 years of age, from Wales, going to Liverpool. Hey, Taffy, you talk like us, or we'll lip you. To lip somebody is to place the forehead in front of the lip with force. I actually asked, what does lip mean? We'll show you, Taffy. Oh, dear. Yeah, I switched to a Liverpool accent just like that. I mean, survival is important with language always, isn't it? The survival of the linguistically fittest. So I had one accent which was then overlain with another. And then when I was 18 or so, I moved south into the London area and realized that there was a different accent down there as well, and it was rather posh. And it was really rather nice to have that sort of accent, and so perhaps one should acquire that kind of accent if one was going to get on in the world. So I did. And then I moved back to Wales. Who am I now? Who am I? Identity is at the heart of all of this. And as a result, because of all these features and influences, I forgot to tell you, there was a point when I married a received pronunciation speaking speech therapist who is sitting over there. And she sorted me out with her accent. She claims I messed up her accent. But I claim she, messed up mine? No, added another dimension to the mixture that was already there. So as a result, I have an accent that what we linguists technically call a mess. Or rather, a mixture, a mongrel. It's an inconsistent accent as well. I never quite know what's going to come out. Am I going to say example or am I going to say example? I never quite know. Am I going to say bath or bath? We'll talk about more of that in a little while. Now with dialect, the problem is is different. You see, the problem with dialects is that there are so many of them because of the way the history of the English language evolved. There have always been dialect differences in English and accent differences in English, right from the very beginning. You know the story. 449 AD, 3 boats from the continent, according to the Venerable Bede, arrive in Kent, in Pegwell Bay. If you've been there, you'll see a huge replica of a Viking warship on the cliff top. Pegwell Bay is where the hovercrafts used to go. Do you remember hovercrafts once upon a time? That's Pegwell Bay. Closest place to the continent. Good for hovercrafts, good for Anglo-Saxons. They arrive, they get out of their ships, but they are from different parts of the continent. According to Bede, the people who arrived in England over the next 50, 100 years, some came from present-day France, some from present-day Belgium, some from the Netherlands, the Jutes, apparently, from Denmark. And so they already arrived with different accents and different dialects, settled in different parts of the country, as you know, some near Southampton, some in Kent, some in London area, some in the East Anglia, some in Humber. And so there were always accents and dialects there, right from the very beginning. And as time goes on, these accents and these dialects become more and more diversified. Now, the problem with studying these things is, the problem of studying accents is how, as I said before, how do you write them down? Because the sounds are tricky things. The problem with dialects is that there are so many words. So many words. How many dialect words are there in the language? If you counted them all, what would you end up with? Well, there are an awful lot of words in English to begin with. How many words are there in the English language? Answer, nobody knows. Nobody has ever counted them all. If you count the words that are in the big Oxford English Dictionary, there are 600,000 in there. Count the words that are in the big American Webster Dictionary, there are 600,000 in there. But they're not the same 600,000. Because the American words are all American and the British words are all, Scottish and Welsh and Irish and so on. And so there are at least 1 million different words in those two dictionaries alone, let alone all the specialist terms that don't get into those big dictionaries, like, the technical terms of physics or chemistry or botany. Most of them don't get into the general dictionaries. How many terms are there in those fields? Gosh, I don't know. How many abbreviations are there? There's a book called Gale's Dictionary of Abbreviations, and there's 500,000 abbreviations in it. And every time I look up an abbreviation in there, it isn't in there. So there's probably 1 million at least, I don't know. You can't count the number of words in the English language. There are just too many, let alone all the words that are coming up all over the English-speaking world, like the words in Ghana and Nigeria and Singapore and all of these places where English is now a global language. So dialect, you see, reflects this. How many dialect words are there? I do not know. Nobody has ever counted them all. Nobody's ever surveyed them all. Imagine surveying all the dialect differences around all the English-speaking areas of the world. It would take you a lifetime. Imagine just doing it for this country, by which I mean the United Kingdom. There's England down there, you've probably noticed. And over there, there's Ireland and Wales, and of course, Scotland. Could anybody ever survey all the dialect words in those 4 parts of the United Kingdom, of the British Isles, if you like? Well, that's what Joseph Wright did for the first time over 100 years ago. It was the most amazing thing in the history of English, to my mind. The first English dialect dictionary, published between 1898 and 1905. And did you know it existed? Most people will say, never heard of him. But what a guy to have never heard of. This is a man who, as a little lad, in a weaving town in Yorkshire, started off as a donkey boy, bringing the donkey around the various blacksmiths and so on to collect their tools and generally deliver stuff that they'd fixed. He did that for a couple of years, and then he went and joined the local mill, where he became a doffer. A doffer is somebody who moves all the bobbins along and makes sure that there are fresh bobbins ready for the material to be wound around. And he worked there for several years, completely illiterate, of course, but listening all the time to the different accents and dialects of the workers around him. During his teenage years, he decided he needed some education. He wasn't going to get anywhere at the local school, although they did set up a local school. This was Saltaire. Saltaire in Yorkshire, it's a World Heritage Site now. And the mill owner there set up a local school. Wright in his biography says, I learnt nothing at local school, nothing at all. I had to teach myself. What did he learn from? He learned to read and write from reading the Bible and reading Bunyan's Pilgrim's Progress. And having learnt to read and write, he thought there's more to life than just English. So he taught himself Latin and French and shorthand, which was very popular in those days. Started teaching himself, went to did evening classes, started to earn some money, earned enough money to take himself off to Heidelberg, where he did a course in comparative philology, that is the history of languages over a long period of time, ended up getting a degree, stayed on, got a doctorate degree, came back to this country, ended up as professor of comparative philology at the University of Oxford. From donkey boy to Oxford professor. Has there ever been a story like that in the history of language? I don't think so. That's Joseph Wright. In the 1890s, he decided it was time that there should be a dialect dictionary, a collection of all the words in the English language, insofar as it was in the British Isles, that expressed local identities. Now, there are only two ways in which you can do a dialect survey. One is for the dialect words to come to you, and the other is for you to go to them, as it were. Both ways of doing it. Going to them is hard. It means you go out and just go around the country with your microphone or your notebook and collect them. This is the sort of thing that a man you might know did in the 1970s and 80s, a chap called Stanley Ellis. Some of you with long British memories might remember a series in the 1980s called Words of the Town, Words of the Country on Radio 4. Stanley used to get in his car with his caravan, go around the country, see a promising looking farm, stop outside, knock on the door, ask the farmer if he could park in his field, and then get his questionnaire out and say, after a drink or two, of course, what do you call that hedge? What do you call that tree? What do you call those animals? And so on. And he would collect words and words and words like that. That's one way of doing it. You go to them. Joseph Wright did it the other way round. He stayed in one place, in Oxford, and he got people to come to him. He developed a network of correspondents all over the country, over 600 of them, 60 from Scotland alone, all parts of the country. And he would send out guidelines and ask them to send him in any words or senses of words that they knew were local to their part of the world. And did they send stuff in? I mean, people love doing this. You would, wouldn't you? I mean, if somebody said, tell me the local words that are in your part of the world. And if you had the time and the inclination, and these days it's so easy with the internet, but in those days, it all had to be done by post. Oh, sorry, for anybody under a certain age. Post is where you write on a piece of paper with pen and handwriting and put it in an envelope and put a stamp on it and take it to a post box, and then it goes somewhere, and later, if you're lucky, I mean, this is how he did it. All in that way. These days, you'd just email and tweet and all that sort of thing, and you'd have the information in no time. The size of the project was amazing. He collected 117,500 different words and senses from the local dialects of England, Wales, Scotland, and Ireland. 117,000. Doesn't seem so much now, but at the time, there was no collection larger than this. And the books that he produced, this is one of them. This is letter A. I mean, you can have a look at it afterwards in the signing tent if you want. It's just full of detail of this kind. Words and their meanings and their origins and the evidence for them. He didn't just say, send me in the meaning. He says, show me how it was used. And so people sent in examples of usage from all over the place. Letter A alone, he had 1.5 million slips of usage notes from these correspondents all over the place. It was the most amazing project. Never come across anything quite like it, and it was the first. He published it, as I said, between 1898 and 1905, paid for it himself. These are all privately produced volumes. And did you know about it? That is the dictionary that has disappeared. That's the dictionary. That's why I called my little book The Disappearing Dictionary. Because It shouldn't be lost to knowledge, this kind of amazing project. And that's one thing. But the other thing is, and this is the thing that intrigued me more than anything else, are the words that he collected over 100 years ago still being used? Or have they been completely lost to all of us? This is what I really wanted to know. So what I did was, I went through the book from beginning to end and picked out 900 of the best, what I thought were really interesting words, and put them into this little book, which I think is over on the floor there. I'll just show it to you so that you can log it into your visual memory. Thank you, Hilary. It's just a small book, but in here I've picked up some of the words that I think are fascinating because either they sound interesting or they got interesting meanings and so on. And what I want to know is, are they still being used? So what I did for this talk today was I went through and pulled out a number of words that Wright says were used in this part of Scotland 100 years ago or more. Question now, do you still use them or not? Just a few. I can't do them all at the time available. All right, so you're walking along the road. Last night it was terrible rain. So you're walking along the road and your shoes start to make that noise that they make when they get a bit waterlogged. They chorp. Chorp. C-H-O-R-P. They're chorping. Anybody use that word? Anybody know it? 100 years ago, it was very popular around here. Must have been raining in Edinburgh in those days. Can't imagine it. All right. One that was mentioned in the program for this talk. If you're a very tall and skinny person, you're dabberlick. Dabberlick? Has that gone as well? Dabberlick? Nobody knows it. Dabber, a bit like dapper, like. You see, that's the etymology of it. No, that's gone too. To walk in an affected, mincing way. Why that should have come from Scotland, I have no idea. But he found it here, and that's footer. Yeah, yes? Got a yes here. Footer, foot, you see, footer to footer along. Yeah. So I've got, that's partly remembered then. That's great, love that one. This is a word that everybody needs. Somebody is apparently about to vomit and looks as if they might, but you're not sure. You need a word for that. And you coined it first, Scotland. Mumple. Mumple. He's mumpling. To mumple, anybody know that word? That one's gone as well. It should come back. It should come back. We need that word. We need that word. To speak in a complaining tone. To pleep. To pleep. Anybody? Pleep. He's pleeping. No, that's gone. Oh, yes, I've got a yes. Oh, thank you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 yeses. Oh, I'm so happy. You are exhausted from work. You're ram-feasled. Ram-feasled. Yes? No. Oh, yes, there's a yes over there. Thank you. You know, I've done this exercise since the book came out a few months ago in various parts of England. This is the first time I've done it in Scotland. And I choose a set of, say, 10 words like that. Well, I haven't done 10, but even so. And usually people know 2 or 3 of them, and the rest are gone. Here, slightly more then. But I'm not surprised, because one of the big things about Scotland, of course, is the strong sense of linguistic identity that exists here. So maybe some of those words would last a lot longer in Scotland than they might in other parts of the Isles. Anyway, that's the kind of thing that I did for the book. And when Macmillan, the publisher, decided to launch the book, they had an interesting experiment. They said, look, it's time that some of these words came back into the language. It's a shame that they've been lost. And so they put a number up on a website, some of the words that they thought might come back in, and they asked people to vote or to suggest new words that are common in their area, that would be a shame if they were lost forever. And hundreds, thousands of people voted. And they said that the word that gets the most votes, they will put it back into the dictionary. Now, Macmillan has a dictionary. It's called the Big Macmillan Dictionary. It's not as big as the Oxford, but you know what happens with dictionary writers is that they steal from each other. And when a word gets into one dictionary, it gets into the others eventually. So the thought would be that if this word got into Macmillan, eventually it might get into all the others too. Well, they voted and voted and voted. This was all a few months ago. And in the end, one word won, and it was from Scotland. And it came from up north, but I believe it's got a wider usage than just in the area of around Aberdeen and so on, where there must have been a lot of people voting in the Aberdeen area. What are these things? They're my spectacles, they're my specs, but not up there. Up there, they're my spogs. Spogs? Anybody know it? Spogs. S-P-O-G-S. Very popular up in the northeast, it would seem. Unless one guy voted about 6 million times. I'm not quite sure. It might have happened. Anyway, spogs, meaning spectacles, is now back in the dictionary after not having been used in real life for, I suppose, 2 or 3 generations. So that's the first book, The Disappearing Dictionary. And the other one, as I said at the beginning, was You Say Potato, which is all about accents. Now, why You Say Potato? Well, because of the film. You remember it. Fred Astaire, Ginger Rogers, on roller skates, dancing around, wondering whether they should get married or not. You say potato, and I say potato. You say tomato, and I say... You know it, yes, absolutely. Let's call the whole thing off, because it turns out that they have different accents, you see. Accents are always in the news, always. I mean, when I was preparing this talk, I thought, just the other day, a couple of days ago, I thought, let me just type into Google, accents in the news these days, you know, what's being talked about. Here's some of the stories that have come onto the internet in the last week or so. The Huffington Post, a survey which shows that the British accent is the sexiest one in the world, beating the French. I cannot believe that, but that made a story in the Huffington Post. In the Recruiting Times, regional accents can affect your job prospects, it said, which is a rather ponderous way of saying what the Daily Express said, being posh earns you the dosh. That's another story this week. True or false? Well, I'm sure there's both sides to it. And then this one, did you know about this piece of research that was published just late last year in a language journal, that the young people of Glasgow, their accent is now being affected by EastEnders. And maybe that's not so surprising. But, you know, that made a headline as well. These are just headlines from the last few days. Macmillan, once again, not wishing to miss a trick, decided to have a website on You Say Potato. It's still there. You can join it. The thought was, how on earth do we say potato in the English-speaking world? And so they asked everybody in the world to call in and record how they say the word potato. And they did. Well, not everybody. I mean, you know, a few thousand. But it's still there. If you want to record the way you say potato, all you do is you go to the site, which is yousaypotato.net. And there you will see a map of the world with flags all over it. And you can hear how, when I started this, I asked some of my friends, my famous friends, to do it, like Stephen Fry and Melvin Bragg and so on. Well, friends, I say, acquaintances, colleagues, distant relations. And they all recorded their voices, and so did an awful lot of people whose names wouldn't be known. But nonetheless, it produces an extraordinary variety of accents, because the word potato is a fantastic word for showing accent variations. You know, potato, tatty, ta, and all. You know, there's all sorts of variations, aren't there? Tatty is one there, that's right. Absolutely. Now, if you're writing a book on accents, you can't do it alone, really. It's not possible. Accents are, they change so fast.
Such a pain.
You need a generation. Who are you? You need a generation difference. I mean, if you're writing a book on accents, you need a father and a son to do it, it seems to me. And where have you come from?
What?
What? Hello. You see, we start the book by discussing the generation difference between us.
Sorry, I'm just tweeting.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's another generation difference. Yeah. We start the book.
It's such a pain.
Yeah.
I've just, come back. First week at secondary school, I've got this terrible schedule. I've got Frau Schmidt twice.
You got a terrible what?
I've got this terrible schedule. I've got Frau Schmidt. I've got
You've
double
got,
German.
Ben, you've got a
And I
terrible...
don't even think Frau Schmidt's her real name.
Ben, you've got a terrible...
I told you that I've got a terrible schedule and it's a real name.
Ben.
Yeah.
Schedule.
That's what I said, schedule.
No, you said schedule. It's schedule.
Schedule.
Schedule. Come on, you
Schedule.
You can do it.
Schedule. Schedule. Schedule.
Close. We used to have conversations like that. That's how we start the You Say Potato book, with a report of that dialogue which actually happened. And what fascinated me, you see, was where did you get it from?
Well, I didn't get it from you, did I?
Well, absolutely not. Where did he get it from? This is, what year are we talking about here, Ben? 1980?
Well, I was 16, so this would be 2000 and...
Yeah, hang on. I'm the young one in this relationship.
You're stretching the definition of young. Is it in your dictionary?
No, not quite.
It would have been 1994, I suppose?
Yeah. So where did he get it from? It wasn't just him, you see, but all his friends were saying schedule as well. It's obviously an Americanism, but how did they get it? He'd never been to America, except once for a visit to Disneyland when he was that high,
I thought it was probably Friends or The Simpsons or something, just from watching lots of TV.
Yeah. So I thought, he's probably right. Friends. So this is what linguists do.
Oh, God, this is what linguists do.
Yeah. I looked at all the scripts of Friends.
There are 10 series of Friends.
Yeah. All of them that are online, and most of them are. Looking for the word schedule. Is it there? Is that where he got it from? No. Here's research fact number 1. Yeah? There is no instance of the word schedule in any of the early episodes of Friends. Right? Ben, this is called research.
It's called OCD.
Well, it doesn't stop there, of course, because if it wasn't Friends, where was it? Might be The Simpsons.
There are 25 seasons of the TV show The Simpsons.
So I started looking at the scripts of The Simpsons. Fact number 2, there is no use of the word schedule in episodes of The Simpsons. I stopped after the first 3 series, I think. But you couldn't have got it from there. But what was the program we did find it in?
It was a surprise to me, actually, because I loved it, but I didn't remember, it being that much of an influence. It was a TV show in the 90s called Northern Exposure. I loved that show.
Northern Exposure. There I found it. You remember part of the story. The guy arrives in this town in Alaska,
somewhere in Alaska or something.
And he wants to get out, so he has to go to the bus station, and he has to check the timetable for the... Schedule. Yes.
And I wondered if it was in episode 1.
But there I found it. So there was evidence, real evidence of an American influence on Ben's accent. And now, today, if I'm talking to Hillary, for example, I will say schedule. If I'm talking to Ben, I will say schedule, like him. I mean, it's called accommodation. People accommodate to each other. We all do it, don't we? We all slip into the accent of the person we're talking to a bit if we like them, if we're getting on with them. Of course, if we hate them, we will distance ourselves from their accent. But we all do it a bit, some people more than others. And certainly I found myself doing it an awful lot of the time with Ben. Now, another reason why it's so valuable to have this character on stage with me today, it's you I'm talking about.
Me?
Yeah, absolutely.
Me?
Is Ben actually is, as you probably know, certainly if you were here for his session yesterday morning on Shakespeare with the youngsters, he's an actor and a director and a producer specializing mainly in Shakespeare. And one of the things that strikes me is this, we all have different views about accents, feelings about accents, which are the popular ones, which are the sexy ones, which are the beautiful ones, the ugly ones. Where do these ideas come from? And they come from all over the place. They come from the BBC, they come from ITV, they come from commercials. And when you actually look at the accents, listen to the accents that are used on commercials on British television these days, what you're hearing, people like Ben, who will be paid, sort of, ish, to go and do the accent, whatever it might be. And the interesting thing is, haven't times changed in this respect? Once upon a time, only 20, 30 or so years ago, turn on the radio, the television, the accent you'd hear most of the time would be the posh, received pronunciation, the southern British accent, where everybody would read the news in that sort of way. These days, that is still to be heard on the radio, but you'll also hear these days a lot of regional variation. The wonderful Susan Ray from Dundee, now reading the news there. Do you know when Susan first was asked to try that in 1980? First time the Scottish accent had ever been heard on Radio 4 in a newsreader, she got hate mail for it. Yeah, people condemned her for letting the side down, you see, and not having the proper accent on the radio. And poor Susan was taken off her duties at that time, but she's back now. Yeah. And what you hear these days is an extraordinary range of accents on the radio and on the television and in the commercial world. And it's a world, Ben, which you've had to cope with, haven't you?
Oh, my goodness. Actually, have you got another microphone there? I know, I'm an actor, I need 2 microphones. I found myself at the junction point of this change about 10 years ago. I've been working as an actor for 5 years or so, and I started doing work as a voiceover artist. And if you don't know what giving a voiceover is like, basically you go to a recording studio in Soho, and you go into a room, and the room has a little window. It's a bit like a sort of a zoo cage in some respects. And this room is soundproofed, and there's a little desk with a cushion on it to make sure you don't make any noise, and a microphone and headsets and stuff. And through the window, what you see is about 20 people. It's kind of terrifying. It is a bit like being in a zoo. And the 20 people are the marketing people, and the people that wrote the advert, and the people that directed the advert, and the people that produced the advert, and the people that own the company that commissioned the advert. And all of these people have been working on this advert for something in the region of 6 months. They've spent an awful lot of money on it, and they have worked out exactly the right tone, aesthetic, how the advert should look, everything that can sell their product the best. And it was for a cell phone company. And you never get to meet these people oftentimes. And there's an engineer sitting next to the glass, or glass. And he and there's a little piece of paper on the cushion table in front of you. And that piece of paper sometimes has as little as 4 words on it. And I sat down and sort of waved. I couldn't hear them, of course, but I can hear them if he presses a button, and there's a sort of a relay. And he said, "Hi, Ben, the script is in front of you." Okay, thank you. And on the script, it said, let's say it said, "Say hello to tomorrow." They have boiled down this advert and all of this effort and all of this marketing and selling into 4 words. And they can hear these 4 words so clearly in their heads. But very often they have very little capacity by which to be able to explain to you how they would like it to be done. And you don't get any sort of feedback. So the direct engineer says, "Okay, Ben, we're going to go for a take in your own time." Say hello to tomorrow. Yeah, okay, that's great. One of the advertising execs come in. Yeah, hi, Brian. Yeah, that's great. Could you do it again? But could you make it a little bit more blue? Now, I wasn't sure if he meant, depressed, or he was actually asking me to say those 4 words in a particular colour. So I asked, sorry, do you mean the colour blue? Yeah, aquamarine, please, actually. Now, in acting, I often ask my actors to give a word a particular colour, and what I mean by that is that, make the word majesty sound like majesty. And when I think of the word majesty, I think of crown and a throne room and white and black tiles and a dais with a throne on it, and it's red velvet, and I imbue the word majesty with all of that, and I could say majesty. And dustbin has a very different colour. Dustbin is an alleyway, and it's like the Sesame Street dustbin for me, because I suppose I grew up watching that. And I could say the word majesty with the colour of dustbin. Majesty, I don't know, but I was pretty sure, but I thought, he doesn't mean colour like that. So I thought, what does aquamarine mean to me? And I thought of Wales and my home, where I grew up with Dad and Mum in Holyhead. And it reminds me of the sea, and my voice goes deeper, and it goes more growly and stuff. So I said, say hello to tomorrow. And he went, okay, yeah, that's great. Thanks very much, Ben. You're done. And I thought, I'm fired. And I was. 2 months later, the advert for the Cell Company came out with a Welshie, a famous Welshie. And what had happened, of course, is exactly what Dad said, that the tide had turned and people weren't interested in this RP sound anymore. They wanted a regional sound.
And that's what they got. Thank you, Ben.
I'm not going. I'm not going.
No, he's not going. You can't get... Once an actor's on stage, you can't get rid of them, can you?
To be or not to...
No. That's Benjamin, not Benedict. No. And you do it in the middle of the play, not at the beginning of the play. That's where it comes. According to this chap, William Shakespeare, which, of course, is another side to the accent situation completely. And when we talk about accents, we're not just talking about modern accents, we're talking about older accents too. And one of the things we do in the book, and one of the things that Ben does full-time these days with his company, is reconstruct earlier accents from the period in order to see how they sound. And what we thought we'd do before we stop for some questions and discussion was just give you a hint of an older accent rather than the modern ones we've been talking about so far. So reconstructing Shakespeare's accent, or at least the accent that was around in Shakespeare's time. Nobody knows exactly how Shakespeare himself spoke, but you can reconstruct the way in which the accent was used in those days. And just to end with a quick example of it, Ben, give us a sonnet.
Sure.
Do it both ways, perhaps?
Okay.
Yeah, do it in modern English first, for those of you who might not be familiar with it as a sonnet, and then do it in original pronunciation, as we call it.
116?
Famous one.
Yeah?
You did at your wedding, maybe.
Okay. So you've probably heard this at weddings, because it's got the word marriage in it. That's a different talk. It goes, let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments. Love is not love which alters when it alteration finds, or bends with a remover to remove. Oh, no. It is an ever fixed mark which looks on tempests but is never shaken. It is the star to every wandering bark, whose worth's unknown until his height be taken. Love's not time's full, though rosy lips and cheeks within his bending sickle's compass come. Love alters not with his brief hours and weeks, but bears it out even to the edge of doom. If this be error and upon me proved, I never writ, nor no man ever loved.
Now that's a sonnet in which all the lines are supposed to rhyme. What do we get at the end there?
If this be error and upon me proved, I never writ, nor no man ever loved.
Loved, proved and loved. It don't rhyme. Earlier on, doom and come. doom and come. They don't rhyme. There are 6 lines in this poem that don't rhyme, but they should rhyme. So what you do when you reconstruct the accent is you work out the ways in which they would originally have rhymed. We work it out that it could have been prove and loove, or it could have been prov and love. But as you can tell from my accent suddenly, prov is a perfectly normal pronunciation of prove in certain parts of the world, and it was in Shakespeare's day as well. And so if you do it in original pronunciation, suddenly all the rhymes work, and it has a very different auditory effect, as you'll now hear.
Let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments. Love is not love which alters when it alteration finds, or bends with a remova to remove. Oh no, it is an ever fixed mark, which looks on tempest but is never shaken. It is the star to every wandering bark, whose worth's unknown although his height be taken. Love's not time's full, though rosy lips and cheeks within his bending sickle's compass come. Love alters not with his brave oars and wakes, but bears it out e'en to the edge of dumb. If this be error and upon me proved, I never read, nor no man e'er loved.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Well, thank you. We thought we'd stop with a good 10 minutes or so that you could have some questions. And I think maybe, Jenny, you've got a question or two? Or are you going to go straight in? Or what would you
I'm
like
sure
to?
there's lots of audience questions. Do people have questions?
Well, just sort of wave then if you've got
loads.
something you'd like to ask about, and we'll catch you. There's one at the back there. Oh, there's a microphone coming around so we can all hear.
Thank you. Hypothetically speaking, if you had children in a nursery in quite a posh part of Edinburgh,
Hi.
Just hypothetically.
yeah, hypothetically speaking,
Not as far as I know.
and you'd heard feedback from some of the other parents who've got children at the nursery that the carers at the nursery were speaking to the children too much in the Edinburgh vernacular,
Yeah.
and could they please stop? I wonder what your response to that would be.
First of all, I'd ask, what age of child are we talking about? 3? Yeah. In that case, unnecessary. I mean, the whole point about early language learning is that the more you can explore the variety of accents, dialects, and languages, too. Don't forget, something like 3/4 of the world's children are born bilingual, into bilingual families. Bilingualism is the normal human condition. To be monolingual is the exception, is to be handicapped, really. And it's the same with multiple dialects and multiple accents. Most people around the world grow up experiencing a huge variety of accent variations. It happens right from the very beginning. I was talking earlier on to dear Jenny there, who is pregnant, and that little baby in there has already heard some accent variation from the outside world. And in the first year of life, if you've had a little baby, you will know that babbling to the father and babbling to the mother, there are different pitch ranges already. The baby has a higher pitch range talking to the mother, a lower pitch range talking to the father, and so on and so on. So that by the time they're 3, they are already hearing a great deal of variation. Remember, the kids don't know that they're different languages or dialects or accents. They just know people speak differently. And so they start to replicate this in their own speech, to start playing about with it. And it's just a great, playful mass of sound variation. It would be most unfortunate, I think, if people at that point started to jump in and say, oh no, that is wrong, this is right, that is wrong, this is right, and so on. When they get to school, of course, things change. Because the whole point of school is to teach you to become a good citizen in which you can communicate with everybody using a standard language and so on. Not that your local language and your local dialect should be denigrated, of course. That sometimes does happen, unfortunately. But that one can switch between these different styles and become a master, or a mistress, if you like, of language, and be in control over all these variations. So that these variations I see as a very positive thing. And it would be very sad indeed, I think, if a kind of negativity crept in, especially at an early age. Yeah. Thank you. One over there. Yeah. Thank you. And then there's one down here.
The gentleman.
And maybe you've got one already up there.
I wonder how well then Shakespeare's English travelled if he's doing Warwickshire in Hampton Court. Would there have been problems? Can we guess at that, as they weren't exposed the way we are with radio and television?
It's interesting you think it sounded like Warwickshire.
Yeah. I mean, that accent that you heard a few moments ago is an interesting one, isn't it? Because everybody in here, regardless of where you're from, probably recognized a bit of it. Some of you might have recognized the R after a vowel and thought, that reminds me of the West Country or Gloucestershire or Somerset. Some of you will have heard Ben say, oh no, and you think, hey, that's from just down the road here. You know, oh no, you know, that oh sound.
I gave a little bit of OP to the younglings yesterday, and I said, what does it remind you of? We always ask, you know, what accents does it remind you of? And I said, you know, oh, for news of fire that would have sent the brightest heaven of invention, sort of thing. I said, what does it remind you of? And they said, Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yeah.
But because of the ha-ha sound sort of thing, the strong rhotic sound, it's, you know...
But when you actually go through that accent that Ben was using, what you will hear is sometimes flecks of Lancashire, flecks of Yorkshire, flecks of the Southwest, flecks of London, indeed. And that's the accent that travelled the globe, of course. It went across in the Mayflower to America, which is why the Americans all go these days, or many of them do. And on the globe stage, there were actors from all over the place, weren't there, Ben? I mean...
Goodness, they came from Shakespeare's company. They were from Norwich, from Somerset, from up in what's the county that Birmingham's in? Anyway, Birmingham's...
Midlands.
Yeah, the Midlands. They came from all over, and they came together, and their accents all fused together, because they spent 20 years working together, after all. It was an extraordinary time.
So a real mix, in other words, and one that everybody would have been used to. We got away from this in the 18th century when one accent and one dialect became the standard that everybody had to use, you know.
Especially with Shakespeare.
Yeah, and especially with Shakespeare. I mean, you know, for a long time people thought the only way to do Shakespeare was the way Olivier did it or Gielgud did it and so on, in that sort of accent. And so the wheel is slowly turning around to how it used to be. And people are getting much more tolerant these days, I think, of accent variation and dialect variation. And there was one over here. Thank you.
French is said to sometimes to have about half the number of words of English, or have fewer words than English. Does that mean, in your opinion, that French speakers have a simpler view of the world than English speakers?
I want to live and
Now, go on, answer the man.
No, the answer is definitely no. Languages do have varying numbers of words, but they have enough words to talk about what they want to talk about. That's the point. There's no point in going to a language in West Africa that is in the bush there, shall we say, in the jungle, and complain about it because it hasn't got all the terminology for motorbikes that we have in English. Conversely, English will not have the vocabulary for talking about types of jungle fruit that they will have. And so there are always swings and roundabouts in this area of vocabulary. Yes, English has got more words than any other language, but the reason for that is that English has become a global language. And when a language becomes a global language, it's like a vacuum cleaner. It sucks in words from all the languages it comes into contact with. And so English has now got amazing variations that no other language has got. So, for instance, because of the history of English, we have these little triplets of words like flame, fire, and conflagration. Flame is an Anglo-Saxon word, fire is a French word, conflagration is a Latin word. And it's got lots of groups of words like this, which many other languages do not have. Now, of course, if you add in all the science words and everything, French has got just as many science words as English has, one imagines. But English, because it has this global reach, has added to its vocabulary in ways that other languages haven't done. So I don't think there's anything particularly simple about these other languages at all. In fact, they're very complex, but perhaps not just as complex as some aspects of English.